I spent the morning going back through exactly what happened with Iran and the United States in the last 48 hours. And the more I read, the clearer it got that this wasn't just a breakdown. This was a calculated decision. And look, before I go any deeper, drop the country you're watching from in the comments. I want to know who's tuning in right now. I actually do read them. So there's a moment from the last 48 hours that I think a lot of people are going to miss. And it's not just about the headline, you know. The headline is simple. It's clean. It's direct. Iran says it has suspended its commitments to that memorandum of understanding they signed with the United States last month. But that's not really the whole picture. Not even close. Because here's the thing about a memorandum of understanding. It's not a treaty. It's not a formal agreement. It's the soft stuff. The political handshake that says, okay, we're both going to do this thing. We both understand the terms, but we're not signing our names to anything legally binding. Whew. And that's exactly what the U.S. and Iran had last month. A memorandum. An MOU. But what Tehran announced in the last hour, that's not just them saying we're out. That's them saying we're out, and here's why. And by the way, we're doing this while there are active military clashes between us. You see the problem? And I want to walk you through why this is a lot bigger than just another broken promise in the Middle East. Because trust me, this one is different. Let me back up for a second. Iran's deputy foreign minister, Kazem Garibabadi, he's the one who made the statement. And this isn't some random diplomat making noise. This guy has been at the center of every major nuclear and security negotiation Tehran has had with the West for the last decade. He knows what he's saying. He knows what he's signaling. And what he signaled was pretty blunt. We've suspended the implementation of the MOU. That's it. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation, no weasel words. Now, the MOU itself, what was in it? That's the part that's been murky from day one. The details never got fully released to the public, and that's intentional. These things always are. But what we do know is that it involved some kind of mutual de-escalation framework, a mechanism, a way for both sides to step back from the brink. You're probably asking yourself, what kind of commitments were we talking about? Was it nuclear? Was it military? Was it economic? And the answer is all of the above. That's the problem. The memorandum was supposed to be a comprehensive pause button. It was designed to create breathing room, time for both governments to back away from this escalating confrontation that's been building for months. But it didn't work. And now with the suspension, we're in uncharted water. Not because this is the first time Iran has walked away from something, but because of when they did it. Look, let me be honest with you. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This suspension happened against the backdrop of something much bigger. And I think the mainstream coverage is going to frame this as Iran being Iran, as they always do this, as this is just how they negotiate. But that's dangerously lazy. Because if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in the region over the last 3 weeks, the pattern is unmistakable. There was an incident at sea, a confrontation between Iranian naval forces and the U.S. naval vessel. No shots fired, but a standoff, a long one, the kind where both sides know exactly what they're doing. And then there was the escalation of rhetoric from Tehran. Not just the usual death to America chants, something sharper, more specific, more targeted. And then there were the economic signals. The Iranians started moving money in ways that suggested they were preparing for something. Hard currency, gold, commodities, not the normal rhythms of their financial system. So when Garibabadi steps up to the microphone and says they're suspending the MOU, he's not doing it because someone in the government woke up grumpy. He's doing it because there's already been a shift, a real one. And I need you to understand what that shift looks like, because it's not just about Iran. It's about the entire region, and it's about the American position out there. Let me tell you what I mean. For the last 6 months, the U.S. has been trying to rebuild a kind of deterrence architecture in the Middle East. Not exactly the old days of the Cold War, but something like it. A network of alliances and red lines designed to keep Iran's nuclear program in a box. But the thing about deterrence, it only works if the other side believes you'll actually follow through. And right now, I'm not sure Iran believes that. You see, this MOU was supposed to be a bridge, a temporary confidence-building measure. The idea was Iran holds back on its nuclear enrichment, the U.S. holds back on some of the sanctions pressure, and in the meantime, both sides talk about a longer-term deal. But the problem was that neither side actually trusted the other. And I mean, can you blame them? Iran has been burned before. The JCPOA, the 2015 nuclear deal. They signed it, they implemented it, and then the U.S. pulled out. Not because Iran did anything wrong, but because there was a change in administration. And that's the thing about American politics. It's unpredictable. From the outside, it looks chaotic. And for countries like Iran, that chaos is a calculation. Why make a deal if there's a good chance it gets torn up in 2 years? Why commit to anything when the guy you're dealing with might not even be there next election? And I think that's what's happening here. I think the Iranians looked at the MOU and they did the math. And the math didn't add up. So they suspended it. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Because the suspension isn't just about trust. It's about leverage. It's about the timing of the military clashes. It's about the fact that the U.S. is currently in a position of, let's call it, quote, diminished focus. The American military is stretched. There's a lot of attention on Europe, on the Pacific, on the border. And Tehran sees that. They see the carrier group movements. They see the satellite imagery. They see the open source intelligence. The same stuff you and I can Google. They know. And so what they're doing right now is testing. They're pushing. They're probing. They suspended the MOU to see how the U.S. will respond, to see if there's any real consequence, to see if Washington is actually willing to enforce anything. And that's dangerous. That's really dangerous. Because if the U.S. response is weak, if all we get is a strongly worded statement from the State Department, then the Iranians learn something. They learn that they can push further, that they can escalate, that there's no price for walking away. And that's not just a problem for Iran. That's a problem for everyone in the region. Our allies in the Gulf are watching. Israel is watching. Turkey is watching. Everyone is watching. And what they're seeing is an American administration that signed an MOU and then let Iran suspend it without any real pushback. At least not yet. But, and this is the part I keep coming back to, there's another layer. Because the suspension itself, the way it was announced, that was very specific. Gharibabadi didn't just say, we're suspending it. He said, we have suspended implementation. That word, implementation, that's important. Because what it suggests is that the MOU might still exist on paper, that the agreement itself hasn't been renounced, just the parts that actually require action. It's a technical suspension, a bureaucratic move. And that tells me that Iran is leaving themselves an out, a way to come back, a way to restart the process when they feel the conditions are right. But that's the thing about leaving yourself an out. It also means you've already made the decision to leave. And that's a signal. And I want to be really clear about what that signal means for you, for the average American watching this. Because I know a lot of people think Iran stuff is distant. It's over there. It doesn't affect my daily life. But here's the problem. It does. It affects energy prices. It affects inflation. It affects the cost of everything from gas to food. And it affects the security situation for our troops overseas. And when Iran suspends a de-escalation agreement during active military clashes, that's not something that stays contained. That's something that spreads. So let's think about what happens next, what the next 48 hours look like. First, you're going to see statements from the U.S. State Department, probably within the hour. They're going to say they're monitoring the situation. They're going to express concern. They might even say they're reassessing their own posture. But that's just the public stuff. Behind the scenes, there's already been action. The Pentagon has been briefing the National Security Council all morning. There's been consultations with allies. There's been a review of military options. And I don't say that to alarm you. I say it because that's just how it works. That's the process. The problem is when you're in a situation where an MOU has been suspended and there's already active military tension, the margin for error shrinks a lot. Think about it. If an Iranian vessel approaches a U.S. ship right now and there's a misunderstanding, a miscalculation, a wrong turn, what happens? There's no de-escalation framework anymore. There's no hotline. There's no agreement about how to back away. That's the real danger of this suspension. It doesn't just send a message. It removes the guardrails. And when you remove guardrails, things get messy. And honestly, that's what frustrates me most about this whole thing. This didn't have to happen. There were months of warnings. There were people inside the administration who said this agreement was too vague, that it was too easy to walk away from, that it didn't have enforcement mechanisms. And they were right. But those warnings were ignored because the people in charge at the time, they wanted a win. They wanted something they could point to and say, look, we're doing something. So they rushed the MOU through. They didn't insist on the hard stuff, the binding language, the consequences. And now we're here. And the worst part is, this probably wasn't a surprise to anyone at the highest levels. Because if you follow Iranian statements over the last couple of months, you could see this coming. They kept saying they weren't satisfied with the MOU. They kept saying the United States wasn't upholding its side of the agreement. They kept leaving the door open to suspension. And we just kept going. We kept assuming they'd come around, but they didn't. So here we are. Now, I know some people are going to say that I'm being alarmist, that this is just typical posturing from a regime that thrives on confrontation. And I get that. I really do. But the difference this time, the thing that makes this different from all the other times, it's the timing. It's the military clashes. It's the fact that the U.S. military is already engaged in another part of the world. It's the fact that our attention is divided. That's the part that Tehran sees. That's what they're calculating. They think we're distracted, and they think they can get away with more. And the suspension of the MOU, that's the test, that's the first domino. And I want to be really, really honest with you about something. The mainstream media is going to cover this like it's just another diplomatic setback. They're going to say talks break down and Iran defies US. And then they're going to move on to the next news cycle. But that's not what this is. This is a fundamental shift in the risk calculation, not just for Iran, but for the entire region. Because if Iran can suspend a de-escalation agreement during active military clashes, and there's no real consequence, then what's stopping them from doing it again and again and taking it further? What's stopping them from taking a shot at a U.S. asset? What's stopping them from attacking an ally? What's stopping them from testing the nuclear threshold? Those aren't hypothetical questions. Those are the questions being asked inside the Pentagon right now. And I don't think the American public is ready for the answers. But let me take a breath here. Let me step back. Because I don't want to just leave you with doom and gloom. I want to explain what could actually happen next. The U.S. has options. There's always options. The first is diplomatic. They can go to the UN. They can bring a resolution. They can try to increase international pressure on Iran to restore the MOU. And maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. But the clock is ticking. The second option is economic. More sanctions, tighter enforcement, cutting off more of Iran's oil revenue. That kind of pressure can be effective, but it takes time. It doesn't solve the immediate problem. And the third option is military. And that's the one nobody wants to talk about. But it's there. It's always there. The U.S. has the capability to respond. They have the assets in the region. They have the allies. But a military response, that's a whole different level. That's not just a statement. That's a commitment. That's a path that's hard to turn back from. And I think that's what makes this moment so tense, because both sides know that there's a military option on the table. Both sides know it could be used. And both sides are trying to figure out if the other side is actually willing to use it. That's the dangerous game. That's the brinkmanship. And I want to tell you, the American people should not be sleepwalking into this. This is not a foreign policy problem. This is not a them problem. This is an us problem. Because when a U.S. warship is out there and Iranian forces are out there and there's no agreement about how to de-escalate, every moment is a moment of risk. And I don't think we as a country are prepared for that. So let me bring it back to where I started, the suspension, the MOU. What happened here was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice by Tehran. They looked at the situation, they looked at the U.S. posture, and they decided to call the bluff. The question is, was there a bluff to call? Or did we actually mean what we said? Because if we didn't, if this was just a piece of paper, then the Iranians are right to walk away. And if we did, then we have to act like it. The next few days are going to tell us a lot about the administration, about the military, about where this country actually stands on its red lines. And I'm not sure we're going to like the answer. But here's the thing you have to understand. This moment, the suspension of this MOU, this is just one part of a much bigger picture. There's a pattern, there's a trajectory, and it's not a good one. I've been paying attention to these things for a long time, and I've learned to watch for the moments when the guardrails come off. This is one of those moments. And the reason I'm telling you this, the reason I sat down to walk you through this whole thing, is because I think people deserve to know. Not just the headline, the whole thing. Because when Iran says they've suspended their commitments to the United States in the middle of active military clashes, that's not a story. That's a warning. That's a signal that something has fundamentally shifted. And I think we're going to be feeling the effects of this moment for a very long time. One more thing, and this is the thing that's been bothering me most of all. Nobody is going to come out and say this on the news. Nobody is going to spell it out for you. But the suspension of this MOU, it's not just about Iran. It's about what the rest of the world sees when they look at the United States right now. They see an administration that's stretched thin. They see an administration that signed an agreement and then let it fall apart without a fight. And they're asking themselves the same question I've been asking all morning. Is the United States still willing to enforce its commitments? Because if the answer is no, if we're not willing to hold the line, then that changes everything for Iran, for North Korea, for China, for Russia. It changes the whole global calculus. And that's why this moment matters. Not because of one MOU, not because of one suspension, but because of what it says about the United States in the world. And I think we're about to find out what that answer really is. And I'm not sure we're going to like it. So keep your eyes on this one. Don't let the mainstream media frame it as just another diplomatic hiccup. This is bigger, and I'll be following this very closely in the coming days. Because I think the next move, whatever it is going to tell us everything about what comes next. I don't know about you, but I've got a feeling we're just at the beginning of this thing. Let me know your thoughts. You know where to find me in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one. This isn't over.